When Angela Diaz first rolled into Orange County, California, she looked like the kind of woman who had it all figured out. You know the type, bright, beautiful, confident, the kind of person who walks into a coffee shop and everyone instantly thinks, dang, she's important. She wasn't just attractive on the outside. She carried herself like she belonged at the top. A legal powerhouse, she said, an attorney pulling down six figures, working high-profile cases that were so sensitive she couldn't even really talk about them. Big mystery energy. People were buying it because she was selling it, and selling it hard. Angela's story was like a curated Instagram page brought to life. She had the high-powered career, the loving husband, the fairy tale wedding photos, the promises of a happy, growing family. It was all so picture-perfect, it almost felt scripted. And that's because, in a way, it was. Every detail, every smile, every so-called achievement, it was manufactured, polished, and rehearsed. See, Orange County is a place where appearances matter. The sun's always shining, the lawns are manicured, and people post photos of their dogs drinking oat milk lattes. It's the kind of environment where blending in with success is easier if you just look the part. And Angela, she understood that. She knew that if you dress the dream, act the dream, and sprinkle just enough humble brag in a conversation, no one's going to look too closely. No one wants to believe the girl with the cute smile and the busy lawyer excuses is running a scam bigger than half the TV shows they binge. Angela had studied the playbook. She knew how to use just enough truth to make the lies stick. She'd show off legal textbooks, mention court dates, throw around vague legal jargon in conversations. Not so much that people could fact-check her, but just enough to sound impressive. When she met Ian Diaz, a real U.S. Marshal, mind you, it was like she leveled up her whole performance. Now, she wasn't just a successful lawyer. She was a successful lawyer married to a literal federal agent. Talk about the ultimate power couple optics. They were the people you saw at brunch and immediately felt like you needed to get your life together. But here's the thing. Behind the designer handbag, the sparkling diamond ring, and the winning smile, there was nothing. No law degree, no career, no important court cases. Just a crumbling stack of lies glued together with desperation and a scary level of commitment to the bit. Angela wasn't just faking it till she made it. She was faking it like her life depended on it. And honestly, for Angela, maybe it did feel that way. Some people lie to get out of a bad situation. Others lie because they're afraid. Angela lied because it was the only way she knew how to survive in the world she wanted to be part of. She didn't just want to belong to the Orange County elite. She needed it like oxygen. She needed the validation, the admiration, the sympathy. She needed people to look at her and think, she's one of us. She's amazing. It's almost tragic in a way, if it weren't so terrifying. Because Angela's need to be seen, to be adored, wasn't harmless. It wasn't some sad little fantasy that lived in her diary. It was active. It was aggressive. It was dangerous. And, as we'd all later find out, the same imagination she used to invent her picture-perfect life, she would use it to ruin someone else's real one. Without hesitation, without remorse, without blinking an eye. Angela Diaz moved to Orange County like a storm in a sundress. Smiling, shimmering, electrifying, and almost no one noticed the dark clouds swirling underneath. She wasn't just pretending to be someone better. She was building a whole fake universe around herself, brick by brick, lie by lie, pulling everyone into the dream world she had created, until eventually the dream turned into a nightmare. And the scariest part? For a while it worked. Angela Diaz didn't just stroll into Ian Diaz's life. She stormed in like a siren with a mission. It was fast, it was flashy, and it was intoxicating. To outsiders, it looked like fate had handed Ian a much-needed second chance at happiness. He had just come out of a messy, painful breakup with Michelle Hadley, a relationship that had been like a slow-motion car crash, all fiery arguments and shattered trust. Ian was vulnerable, raw, looking for an anchor in a storm. And here came Angela, all smiles and softness and promises of a better tomorrow. It wasn't a slow-burn romance. It wasn't candlelit dates and cautious steps. No, Angela swooped in with the kind of whirlwind energy that convinces you it must be destiny. In what felt like the blink of an eye, Ian and Angela were talking about forever. Within months, they weren't just dating, they were married. Rings exchanged, vows whispered, dreams locked in. To anyone watching, it was romantic, even enviable. Ian had found someone who adored him, someone who seemed to offer unconditional love after months of emotional bruising. But if he looked a little closer, really looked, it didn't feel quite right. It felt forced, like Angela wasn't just falling for Ian. She was hurrying to trap him before he could realize what was happening. Angela played her part flawlessly. She wrapped herself in innocence and painted herself as the polar opposite of Michelle Hadley. Where Michelle had been passionate, opinionated, sometimes fiery, Angela was composed, gentle, agreeable. Where Michelle had challenged Ian, Angela catered to him. She knew exactly which scars to soothe, exactly which words to say. She became whatever he needed most in his most broken moments. It was a performance crafted not from love, but from calculation. A rescue fantasy so tailored it could have been written by Hollywood screenwriters. And it worked. Ian, wounded and craving stability, clung to her. He didn't ask too many questions. He didn't second-guess the speed of it all. After everything he'd been through, the last thing he wanted was another battle. Angela made it feel easy, effortless, like a balm to every jagged edge left behind by his past. So they married. Quickly, quietly, blindly. But what Ian didn't see, what no one really saw, was that Angela wasn't just marrying him for love or companionship. She was laying the groundwork for something so much darker, something far more twisted than anyone could have imagined. By becoming Ian's wife, Angela wasn't just securing her place at his side. She was stepping into a role that gave her power. Real power, legal power, emotional power, power over perception, over narratives, over Michelle Hadley's future. Because while the world celebrated their fresh start, Angela's mind was already miles ahead, plotting, spinning, weaving. In her eyes, the marriage wasn't an ending to Ian's drama. It was a beginning, a fresh stage, a loaded gun, a chessboard set for war. And Michelle Hadley, whether she knew it or not, had just been cast as the villain in a story she didn't even realize was being written about her. The scary thing about manipulators like Angela is that they don't need time to build trust. They just need opportunity, a crack in the wall, an emotional injury. And Ian Diaz, after surviving a relationship that left him battered and distrustful, was the perfect opening. He didn't see Angela's red flags because she wasn't waving them in the air. She was stitching them into a wedding dress and telling him it was silk. The marriage was rushed, yes, but that wasn't a mistake. It was a strategy. The faster she locked Ian down, the less time he had to notice the cracks. The less time he had to wonder why her backstory didn't quite add up, why her credentials were foggy, why her behavior was sometimes off. The less time he had to figure out that the woman he thought was saving him was actually setting him up for something much, much worse. In the bright California sun, Ian Diaz thought he had found peace. A new chapter, a love story worth fighting for. But in reality, he had just handed the pen over to someone who was about to rewrite everyone's fate, and not in a way any of them could ever have seen coming. Angela didn't just marry Ian Diaz. She married herself to the chaos she was about to unleash. It started quietly, like a whisper you can barely hear, but you know it's there. At first, it was just small, subtle hints Angela dropped into conversations with Ian, friends, co-workers, anyone who would listen. She began suggesting that something wasn't right. That Michelle Hadley, Ian's ex, wasn't just some bitter memory from the past. No, Angela said Michelle was obsessed, dangerous, deranged. Angela told people that she was being watched, stalked, harassed. She claimed Michelle couldn't let go, that she was lurking in the shadows of their new life together, refusing to accept that Ian had moved on. It wasn't just jealousy, Angela insisted. It was something darker, a calculated campaign to destroy her. And the scary part? Angela had evidence. Or so it seemed. Emails started popping up in Angela's inbox. Vicious, threatening emails, written in graphic detail. Messages that warned her to leave Ian, that promised pain. humiliation, revenge. They were chilling. They felt like something ripped straight out of a horror movie. Angela would show Ian the emails, her hands shaking, her voice cracking with fear. "Look what she said to me," Angela would whisper, as if she was too terrified to even raise her voice. But that wasn't all. Suddenly, Craigslist ads started appearing. Ads that made your stomach twist just reading them. Angela told everyone that Michelle was posting personal ads in her name. Disgusting, dangerous ads inviting strangers to come to her home, to violate her, to assault her, all while pretending she was a willing participant. It was a nightmare scenario, something so twisted it was hard for the mind to even process. Angela wasn't just claiming harassment. She was painting herself as the ultimate victim in a deeply terrifying story. She described terrifying encounters, strange men showing up at her house, believing they had been invited by her, men who thought she was asking for something unspeakable. The fear she portrayed was raw, visceral, consuming. She said she was living in terror, constantly looking over her shoulder, afraid to even be in her own home. And who could doubt her? Who would doubt a terrified wife, married to a federal marshal, begging for protection from a seemingly obsessed ex-girlfriend? Angela knew exactly how to hit every emotional nerve. She understood that when a woman says she's being stalked, harassed, and threatened, especially by another woman who supposedly can't move on, people listen. People act. The police were called. Investigations were opened. Michelle Hadley's name was dragged through the mud so thoroughly that the world didn't just believe Angela's story. They ran with it. News outlets picked it up. Social media exploded with judgment. Michelle wasn't just a jilted ex in the public eye anymore. She was now a monster, a predator, a danger to society. But what no one realized, what no one even thought to question, was that Angela wasn't a victim at all. She was the author of the entire nightmare. Angela had faked everything. The emails? Fabricated. She wrote them herself. The Craigslist ads? Created by her from scratch. The so-called threats, the fake assaults, the tidal wave of terror she claimed was suffocating her life. All of it had been built meticulously by her own hand. Line by line, word by word, clicking send from her own devices, from her own twisted imagination. She wasn't just accusing Michelle Hadley. She was orchestrating a full-blown psychological assassination. A takedown so elaborate that it took months before anyone even considered that Angela might be lying. And the most chilling part? Angela didn't do it in a moment of panic. It wasn't some impulsive act of revenge or fear. She crafted this nightmare with patience, with precision, with an ice-cold sense of strategy that would make seasoned criminals jealous. She built a world where Michelle Hadley was the villain, the predator, the stalker, and Angela was the poor, broken heroine fighting to survive. The world believed her because Angela didn't just fake evidence. She faked pain. She faked fear. She faked trauma. She weaponized every ounce of sympathy and trust the system was designed to give to real victims. And Michelle Hadley? She had no idea that her life, her freedom, her very identity was being quietly and systematically demolished behind the scenes by someone she barely even knew anymore. Angela wasn't just playing a victim. She was rewriting reality itself. And for a terrifyingly long time, everyone bought it. If you thought Angela's lies ended with fake emails and Craigslist ads, you'd be giving her way too much credit. Angela wasn't just lying to save face or win a petty argument. No, she was building an entire alternate reality. And when she realized that people were starting to take her side, that law enforcement was beginning to lean in, to trust her, she didn't slow down. She doubled down. She didn't just want to be seen as a victim. She wanted to be untouchable. So, Angela upped the stakes in a way that still makes people's skin crawl to this day. She told the world she was pregnant. Yes, in the middle of the chaos, the fake threats, the supposed stalking, the calls to the police, Angela announced that she was carrying Ian Diaz's child. Their future, their hope, their reason for fighting through the storm. She spoke about it like it was this beautiful, fragile thing they needed to protect from the darkness that was supposedly Michelle Hadley. But she wasn't just pregnant. No, that alone wasn't dramatic enough. Angela told law enforcement, friends, family, whoever would listen, that Michelle wasn't just sending threatening emails anymore. Michelle was actively trying to harm her unborn child. Let that sink in. Angela manufactured a world where she wasn't just a woman being harassed. She was an expectant mother, fighting to protect an innocent life from a violent, obsessed stalker. The optics of it were devastating. Who wouldn't rush to defend a pregnant woman fearing for her baby's life? The sympathy, the outrage, the urgent need for justice. It all built like a tidal wave in her favor. And just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, Angela added another layer. She told them she had cancer. Yeah, cancer. In the middle of all the supposed harassment, Angela claimed she was fighting for her life twice over, once for her unborn child and once for herself. She said she was dealing with a brutal cancer diagnosis, that she was going through unimaginable stress and fear. And every piece of that stress, she pointedly claimed, was being made worse by Michelle Hadley's relentless campaign of terror. It was manipulation on a level most people can't even comprehend. Angela knew exactly how to weaponize people's deepest instincts, to protect, to care, to fight for the vulnerable. She knew that if she wrapped herself in the tragedies people fear most, a threatened pregnancy, a cancer diagnosis, no one would dare question her. No one would look too closely. No one would ask the hard questions. Because who would accuse a pregnant woman with cancer of lying? Who would dare? The police didn't. The prosecutors didn't. The media didn't. Angela sat back and watched as everyone rallied to her side, sharpening their knives for Michelle Hadley. She watched as Michelle's life crumbled under the weight of accusations that weren't just brutal. They were absolutely unthinkable. Imagine being framed as the kind of monster who would stalk a pregnant woman, a cancer patient, and try to cause them harm. Imagine waking up and realizing that, to the entire world, you were public enemy number one, all based on lies you never even saw coming. Angela didn't just build a trap. She laced it with the most heartbreaking human experiences possible, so that anyone who stepped into the situation wouldn't just believe her. They would fight for her. They would defend her. They would hate Michelle Hadley with a passion that burned out of control. And while Michelle sat confused, horrified, and helpless as her entire life was ripped apart, Angela smiled sweetly, clutching her fake baby bump and talking about her next doctor's appointment. She lied about medical visits, lied about ultrasounds, lied about test results. She wove a web so thick, so sticky with fabricated heartbreak, that not a single person close to her could even imagine she might be lying. Angela wasn't just manipulating the facts. She was manipulating human empathy itself, turning kindness into a weapon, turning compassion into a loaded gun aimed directly at Michelle Hadley's life. And for a long time, it worked. Everything Angela had plotted, every cruel lie she had carefully planted like a seed in fertile ground, finally exploded into the outcome she had been engineering from the beginning. Michelle Hadley, an innocent woman, was arrested. And not just quietly arrested like it was some routine misunderstanding. No, she was dragged through the entire system in the most brutal, humiliating way possible. Picture it. 1 minute you're living your life, trying to heal from a messy breakup, trying to move on, and the next minute you're in handcuffs. You're sitting in a police station being fingerprinted, photographed, interrogated about things you didn't even know existed. All while people, cops, lawyers, strangers, look at you with pure disgust in their eyes, convinced you're capable of the absolute worst. Michelle Hadley was accused of stalking, of issuing death threats, of endangering the life of an unborn child. The media painted her as a jealous, vengeful lunatic who simply could not let go of her ex-boyfriend. News outlets picked up her mugshot and blasted it across every TV screen, every news app, every Twitter feed, every Facebook timeline. Her name became synonymous with violence, with hatred, with cruelty. And in the court of public opinion, there are no appeals. There are no second chances. Michelle lost her job. She lost friendships. She lost trust, opportunities, her good name. Everything she had built over the course of her life was smashed into a million pieces within days. Her reputation wasn't just damaged. It was absolutely annihilated. And the worst part? She couldn't even defend herself. Because how do you prove a negative? How do you stand up and convince the world that you didn't send threatening emails, that you didn't create horrifying Craigslist ads, that you weren't the monster everyone believed you were? In the world Angela had built, Michelle Hadley's innocence wasn't just hidden, it was buried. Buried under fake emails, fake pregnancies, fake cancer diagnoses, and a mountain of lies so deep that truth itself couldn't even breathe. Michelle tried to scream her innocence, but nobody was listening, because the story they had been fed, that of a terrified pregnant woman battling a relentless stalker while undergoing cancer treatment, was too powerful, too emotional, too perfectly manipulated to question. While Michelle sat in jail, yes, actual jail, Angela went on living her fake life, smiling for photos, sharing fake updates about her pregnancy, crying to authorities about how scared she was. She soaked up the sympathy like a black hole, while Michelle sat behind bars, grappling with the terrifying reality that she might never get her old life back. Imagine the nightmare. Your future slipping through your fingers. Your identity being rewritten into something ugly, something monstrous, something you're not. Every hour in that cell feeling longer than the last. Every glance from a guard or another inmate full of judgment you don't deserve. Every memory of your old life taunting you like a ghost you can't touch anymore. Michelle Hadley was innocent, but innocence didn't matter. Not when the lie was more compelling than the truth. Not when Angela's web of deceit had been spun so tightly that no one could see a way out. By the time cracks started forming in Angela's story, tiny fractures that eventually led investigators to question the narrative, it was too late. The damage was already done. Michelle Hadley's life had already been shattered, and no amount of apologies, no future trial, no guilty verdict against Angela could ever truly undo what had been lost. Because when you break someone's soul, you can't just glue it back together. Some scars stay forever. At first, the story Angela Diaz had built seemed bulletproof. She looked like the perfect victim, the pregnant wife, the brave cancer fighter, the terrified woman begging for protection against a heartless stalker. But what Angela didn't count on was this. The truth has a nasty habit of clawing its way to the surface, no matter how deep you try to bury it. It started with little things, tiny inconsistencies, minor details that didn't quite add up. Nothing obvious at first, just little whispers of doubt, background noise easy to ignore. But eventually, law enforcement started to notice. Some of the emails Angela claimed were terrifying her. They didn't exactly line up with Michelle Hadley's known whereabouts. Some Craigslist ads supposedly posted by Michelle, they seemed almost too conveniently located, too perfectly written to fit the narrative Angela was selling. And then came the real turning point. The forensics. See, technology is a beautiful thing. Every email you send, every ad you post, every click you make, it leaves a fingerprint, an invisible trail of digital crumbs. And when the police finally took a deep, proper look at the evidence, when they stopped simply believing Angela's story and started analyzing it with cold, hard science, the cracks blew wide open. The IP addresses, the device signatures, the login locations, they didn't match Michelle Hadley. They pointed straight back to Angela. Emails Angela had wept over in court, claiming they made her fear for her life. Sent from her own devices. Craigslist ads she had wailed about to detectives, insisting they were from Michelle, traced back to the same networks Angela herself had been connected to. Phone records, Wi-Fi pings, metadata embedded in attachments and screenshots. All roads led back to one person. Not Michelle Hadley, Angela Diaz. Imagine that moment. Imagine being the investigator, sitting there, watching the results roll in, realizing that this so-called victim you've been protecting, the woman you threw an innocent person in jail for, she was the architect of the whole thing. The horror, the disbelief, the gut punch realization that you hadn't just gotten it wrong. You had helped destroy an innocent life based on a complete fabrication. And it wasn't just once or twice. Angela had orchestrated an entire campaign of deception, fabricating dozens of fake emails, fake posts, fake evidence, fake threats, layering lie upon lie until it seemed unshakable. But technology doesn't lie. Data doesn't lie. And when the truth started spilling out, it poured like a dam breaking. Investigators realized that every key piece of evidence, every smoking gun email that supposedly proved Michelle's guilt, had actually been written by Angela herself, sent from her own phone, her own laptop, her own IP address. The image of Angela Diaz as the fragile, pregnant, cancer-stricken victim shattered into 1,000 pieces. And standing there, exposed for the world to see, was the real Angela. A cold, calculating manipulator who had been willing to sacrifice an innocent woman's entire existence just to win a twisted game she had invented. Angela hadn't been defending herself. She had been playing everyone around her like puppets on strings: the police, the prosecutors, the public, even Ian Diaz himself. And she almost got away with it. Almost. The discovery was seismic. Everything shifted in an instant. Michelle Hadley wasn't the villain. She was the victim of one of the most elaborate and cruel false framing cases anyone had ever seen. And Angela Diaz wasn't a victim. She was a criminal mastermind of the worst kind. The kind who weaponizes other people's trust, love, and compassion as tools of destruction. From that moment forward, the entire case flipped upside down. But for Michelle Hadley, no amount of truth could give her back the months she had lost, the reputation that had been torn apart, the trauma that had been tattooed onto her soul. Some damages can't be undone, and some scars never really fade. When the real picture finally came into focus, it was almost too insane to believe. Angela Diaz hadn't just bent the truth. She hadn't just exaggerated a few things to make herself look better. No, she had manufactured an entire nightmare out of thin air. Every horrifying email, every desperate message, every supposed threat, it was all a mirage, a meticulously handcrafted illusion. Angela had fabricated the entire harassment story from scratch. And it didn't stop at just sending a few scary emails to herself. She went way darker than that. Angela created fake Craigslist ads, but not just any ads. She crafted ads that set up scenarios so dangerous, so sickening, they made people's skin crawl. She posed as herself and invited strangers, total strangers, to come to her home under the belief that they were engaging in violent, non-consensual acts. Yes, she lured random men to her own door, suggesting that they would be fulfilling someone's darkest, most dangerous fantasies, and all while pretending that Michelle Hadley was the one orchestrating it. Just let that sink in for a second. She weaponized the darkest corners of the internet. She gambled with her own safety, her own life, just to make the lie look more convincing. And she did it all with chilling calculation. Angela placed these ads and responded to them herself, feeding the narrative by pretending to be Michelle Hadley, by creating fake email accounts, by holding fake conversations, by scheduling these meetups to create real-life danger. She wanted law enforcement to believe that Michelle wasn't just a bitter ex-girlfriend, but an obsessed, relentless, unhinged threat to her safety and the safety of her unborn child. And the scariest part? It worked. For a while, it actually worked. Strangers showed up at Angela's condo, knocking on the door, texting, expecting something twisted because of what the fake ads had promised them. Angela then used these setups as proof to call the police, to cry to detectives, to point a shaking finger at Michelle Hadley and scream, "See? She's trying to hurt me." She orchestrated the entire play, cast herself as the hero, the victim, and the villain, and Michelle Hadley never even knew she was on the stage. Angela was directing a real-life horror movie, and Michelle, she was just a prop. Collateral damage in a performance so cold-blooded and so manipulative that it nearly ruined her life forever. Think about the lengths Angela had to go to for this to happen. The planning, the scripting, the patience it took to create so many different layers of deception. Fake conversations, fake threats, fake emergencies, all stacking up until even the police, trained to spot lies, were completely fooled. This wasn't just lying. It was artistry. It was weaponized storytelling used for destruction. And the genius of it, if you can call it that, was how it preyed on basic human instincts. Who wouldn't want to protect a vulnerable, pregnant woman? Who wouldn't believe a terrified cancer patient calling for help? Angela knew exactly which emotional buttons to push, and she smashed every single one of them. But at the end of the day, truth has a way of clawing its way to the surface. And once investigators realized that every terrifying ad, every life-threatening setup, every so-called piece of evidence had Angela's fingerprints all over it, the entire house of cards she built started to collapse with a deafening crash. Angela hadn't just lied. She had engineered terror, and she had almost gotten away with it. But almost doesn't mean anything when the truth finally steps into the light. And when it did, it burned away every lie Angela Diaz had ever told. When everything finally caught up to Angela Diaz, there was no dramatic car chase, no last-minute escape, no tearful denial on the courthouse steps. No, it ended the way all illusions eventually do, with a cold, sharp slap of reality hitting her square in the face. By 2017, Angela couldn't run anymore. The mountain of evidence was too high, the digital footprints too permanent, the lies too tangled to unravel without tightening around her own neck. So in front of a judge, under the suffocating pressure of undeniable proof, Angela Diaz did the one thing left for her to do. She pled guilty. Not to one charge, not to two, but to multiple felonies: perjury, false imprisonment, fraudulent impersonation, and more. Each word slammed down like a gavel on her perfect, little manufactured world, shattering it into 1,000 irreparable pieces. Let's be clear about what that means, because this isn't some casual "oops, I lied." Angela didn't just make a few mistakes. She weaponized the legal system. She ensnared an innocent woman into a living nightmare, a cage built out of her own deceit, then threw away the key. She stole months of Michelle Hadley's life. She torched her reputation. She left a crater of trauma that no apology, no plea deal, no sentence could ever fully repair. Angela Diaz pled guilty to lying not just to police, but to the courts, to the very foundation of justice itself. And she pled guilty to stealing Michelle's freedom, tricking the system into locking her away like a criminal, while Angela smiled and played the victim on the outside. And when the plea was entered into the record, the courtroom didn't explode with cheers or dramatic gasps. It was quieter than that, more devastating. The way it feels when you realize the monster was wearing a mask the whole time. Angela had fooled everyone. The police, the prosecutors, even Ian Diaz, her then-husband, who had once stood by her side thinking he was protecting his family. In reality, he was just another pawn on her chessboard. The court documents laid it all out in black and white. Angela had staged a campaign of harassment, created fake Craigslist ads inviting strangers to her door, fabricated dozens of threatening emails, and destroyed another woman's life, all for personal gain, all to control the narrative, all to be seen as the helpless damsel instead of the cold, calculating architect she really was. And when the judge read the final list of felonies aloud, it wasn't just Angela's freedom being stripped away. It was her image, her story, her entire fake existence, ripped apart under the fluorescent lights of the courtroom. The truth was laid bare for everyone to see. Angela Diaz wasn't a victim. She was a master manipulator, a fraud, a destroyer disguised as a survivor. And when the sentence was handed down, it wasn't just a punishment. It was a reckoning. For every sleepless night Michelle Hadley endured in a jail cell, for every cruel headline, for every friend and family member who doubted her, for every piece of her future that Angela had tried to burn to ashes. Angela pled guilty. But even with that, no one could ever fully tally up the cost of her lies. Because the thing about wounds like these, they don't heal clean. They leave scars so deep, they change who you are forever. Angela Diaz traded her fake story for a real sentence. And Michelle Hadley? She had to find a way to rebuild the life that Angela tried to erase, piece by shattered piece. The courtroom doors closed, the sound echoing in the distance as the gavel fell. Angela Diaz had pled guilty to multiple felonies, and Michelle Hadley was finally free. Her name, smeared in the mud of a twisted, heartbreaking lie, was about to be cleared. The weight that had been crushing her for months, the shame, the judgment, the questions was lifting piece by piece. But freedom? It wasn't the bright light at the end of the tunnel that Michelle had imagined. No, it wasn't that simple. Michelle Hadley was exonerated. Her record was cleared. The truth, which had been buried under a mountain of lies, was finally exposed for the world to see. But freedom, at least for Michelle, didn't come with the celebration she might have hoped for. No, it came with an entirely different set of challenges, an emotional aftermath that she never could have prepared for. While Angela faced the consequences of her actions in a courtroom, Michelle was left to deal with the emotional and social scars that no legal ruling could ever erase. Her life had been turned upside down. Her reputation, the very foundation of her existence, had been shattered. The world had seen her as a criminal, a woman who had been wrongfully accused of stalking and terrorizing a pregnant woman. People questioned her character, her integrity, even her ability to be trusted. The whispers, the doubting eyes, the subtle or not-so-subtle judgments from friends, family, co-workers, they didn't just disappear because the truth had come to light. Imagine this for a moment. You've spent months behind bars, your future hanging by a fragile thread, your reputation in tatters, and the people who once knew and loved you suddenly unsure if they should still stand by you. Friends who had been there for you, family who had supported you, now watching you through a lens of suspicion because they had been convinced by the weight of the accusations that you were capable of the unspeakable. Even after Michelle was exonerated, it didn't stop. The damage had already been done. Michelle was thrust into a world of public scrutiny she never signed up for. Her personal life had been dragged into the spotlight. Details of her past, her relationships, everything she had worked so hard to keep private, was now out there for the world to pick apart. And the worst part was, even though the truth had come to light, many still refused to believe it. Her career? That was another battleground altogether. Michelle had been fired from her job, and getting back on her feet professionally was no easy feat. Employers, though sympathetic, weren't always ready to take the risk of hiring someone with such a public scandal attached to their name. The accusations had been so bold, so outrageous, that her very presence now carried a stigma, one that she couldn't shake off no matter how much she wanted to leave in the past. And then the social media. The internet's power to build someone up, to elevate them to levels of fame or recognition, was equally matched by its ability to destroy. Michelle had become a symbol of victimhood, but also of suspicion. People on social media rallied behind her, but there were just as many voices that tore her down, reminding her that the accusations once made could never truly disappear. The world was divided. Some believed her, some didn't. And in this chaos, Michelle was left to navigate a world where trust had been broken on every level. And yes, Angela Diaz had pled guilty, her lies exposed for everyone to see. But the truth in Michelle's case didn't instantly heal the wounds. The damage wasn't just a scar that could be erased by a legal victory or a press release. It wasn't that simple. It never is. Michelle tried. She worked hard to rebuild, but it was exhausting. She started over, new job, new life, new friends. She forced herself to pick up the pieces, piece by shattered piece, even though every step felt like walking through quicksand. The weight of everything she had gone through, everything she had been put through, still hung over her like a dark cloud that refused to move. The trauma was deep. It wasn't just the wrongful arrest. It wasn't just the loss of her career. It was the devastation of having to fight a battle for her identity, for her very sense of who she was, and doing so publicly. But there was something else, something fierce and undeniable inside Michelle that kept her going. She had been wronged, yes, but she was not going to be defined by that wrong. Slowly, she started to rebuild her life, brick by brick, piece by piece. And with time, she found a way to speak her truth, to own her journey, the painful, the beautiful, and everything in between. In the end, Michelle Hadley wasn't just a woman who was exonerated. She was a woman who fought back, a woman who faced the darkest moments of her life with unwavering strength, A woman who reclaimed her voice, her identity, and her future, even if it was a battle she had never asked for. Because sometimes the hardest part isn't clearing your name. It's finding a way to live with the pieces that remain after everything falls apart. The thing about lies, the thing that everyone always seems to forget when they're in the midst of creating them, is that they grow. They don't just sit still and wait to be discovered. No, lies have a life of their own. They breathe, they evolve, they spread like a virus until they become something far bigger than anyone can control. And when that happens, when the house of cards starts to crumble, it's never just the liar who suffers. No, the people around them, the people they've manipulated, the people who trusted them, they get caught in the wreckage too. For Angela Diaz, the lies started small, almost imperceptible. She made the mistake of thinking she could build a perfect life, a life that was all hers, that no one could touch, that no one could see through. She wove a story, a beautiful, tragic, complicated narrative of a woman caught in a web of threats, harassment, and a broken relationship. And in the process, she created an illusion, one so complex that even she began to believe it. She was a victim. She was a woman fighting for her family. She was an innocent soul caught in a world that was against her. But as we all know, no story, no matter how intricate or convincing, lasts forever. And Angela's fabricated world, the life she had built from lies, was no exception. It started with Michelle Hadley. It started with one of the most twisted, malicious moves anyone could make, framing an innocent person for crimes they didn't commit. Angela Diaz, driven by some twisted mix of jealousy and insecurity, decided that Michelle was the perfect pawn. She planted the seeds of her deception in the most insidious way, through emails, fake Craigslist ads, and false accusations that dragged Michelle into a nightmare. For months, Michelle was painted as a stalker, a harasser, a threat to Angela's very safety. She lost her job. She lost her reputation. And worse, she was tossed into a legal nightmare she had no way of escaping. At the heart of it all, Angela was playing a dangerous game, a game where the stakes were far higher than anyone could have imagined. She thought she could control the narrative. She thought that her lies, her manipulation, would go unnoticed. She believed that by constructing this web of deceit, she could tear someone else down and build herself up in the process. But the truth is, when you play with lies, when you live inside a story that isn't yours, you forget one critical thing. Truth has a way of coming out. And when the truth finally arrived, it was undeniable. It wasn't a whisper. It wasn't a slow reveal. It was a loud, crashing wave that destroyed everything in its path. Investigators dug deep, following the threads Angela had left behind, and what they uncovered was a horrifying picture of deception. The emails that were believed to have been sent by Michelle, they were traced back to Angela's own devices. The Craigslist ads that terrified Michelle, Angela had written them herself. The entire story of harassment, the whole narrative Angela had crafted, was nothing but an illusion, a carefully constructed lie designed to ruin an innocent woman's life. But here's the thing about lies. They can only grow for so long before the weight of their own falsehoods becomes too much to bear. Angela thought she could outsmart the world, that she could lie and manipulate her way to the top, that she could control the game from behind the scenes. But eventually, the truth always finds its way through. No lie is perfect. No deception is airtight. The walls start to crack. The pieces start to fall into place. And when that happens, the people who thought they were untouchable, the people who thought their lies would keep them safe, they're left with nothing but the ruins of their own creation. For Angela Diaz, that moment came when she pled guilty to multiple felonies, including perjury and false imprisonment. The lies she had told, the innocent life she had destroyed, all came back to haunt her. But even then, it wasn't over. The damage she had caused couldn't just be erased by a plea deal or a courtroom sentence. It didn't stop with Angela's conviction. No, the true cost of a fabricated life is more than legal punishment. It's the aftermath. It's the way the world changes around you when your lies come alight. And for Michelle Hadley, the world had already changed irrevocably. Her life had been taken from her reputation shredded, and she was left to pick up the pieces to try and rebuild from the rubble of the chaos Angela had caused. You see, the real danger of a fabricated life isn't just the harm it does to the person being manipulated. It's the way it twists everything around you, the way it makes people question the truth, the way it poisons relationships, the way it tears down the very fabric of trust. Angela Diaz didn't just destroy Michelle. She destroyed herself in the process, and she didn't even realize it until it was too late. It's easy to get caught up in the illusion, to believe that if you tell a lie enough times, it will become the truth. But that's the danger of a fabricated life. You forget that no lie lasts forever. No mask is permanent. Eventually, it all comes undone, and when it does, the truth is waiting to expose everything you've hidden. What's left when the truth is exposed? What's left when your entire identity has been built on lies? When a story you've crafted for so long has crumbled to dust? Angela Diaz, for all the damage she had done, was left with nothing but the consequences of her actions. And Michelle Hadley, though she was exonerated, was left with scars that no verdict could erase. The truth came out, and it was brutal. But in the end, truth always does. And no matter how carefully you try to fabricate your life, no matter how intricately you weave your web of lies, the truth will always find its way to the surface.